Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Wolok, my partner in crime, as always, Vasili Gianarakos. Vasili, what's going on, brother?
Doing well, Yariv. The hustle and bustle of all the draft talk, free agency is kind of over now. We're kind of settling into what the rest of the offseason is going to be here. The Flyers get another piece of business done with Cam York getting signed. So it'll be good to kind of assess everything that's happened just after all the fallout, right? Like it's been about a week. We kind of get a fair assessment of what's occurred for the Flyers over the draft and free agency. So I'm doing good, man. It's going to be a fun episode. How you doing, Yariv?
Yeah, I'm doing well, dude. I'm excited. This is the long anticipated post-draft episode with our main man, Steve Kournianos, the draft analyst. Steve, welcome back to the show. We're really excited to have you. I know our audience is definitely excited to have you back.
Yeah, welcome. Hello, everybody. Good to be back. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, of course, man. We always look forward to these. And obviously the Flyers have done a lot of work. We're going to go through pretty much a lot of young prospect talk in this episode. It's going to be majority of the episode. And then we'll end a little bit on free agent stuff at the end. But we're going to go through a lot of draft stuff, and then we'll get Steve's opinions on all of the Flyers draft picks. And yeah, we're going to have fun. So before we get started, just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell for notifications to get notified when we release these episodes, because we do it sometimes randomly. And also for the audio version, go to Spotify and iTunes. Give us a rating and a follow if you can. That is the best way to support this podcast. And also want to give a shout out to our sponsors, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Make sure to get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim's. They have one of the best, if not the best, cheesesteak in Philadelphia. Make sure to go to Jim Steaks to get yourself a cheesesteak. Also, Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Go to them for your insurance adjustment needs. They will help facilitate the process between you and your insurance company and make sure you get the best claim possible. Again, Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. And also want to give a shout out to our partner, SportsSpider.com. Guys, if you're tired of searching multiple websites for sports news, SportsSpider.com has you covered. They collect the latest articles, videos, and podcasts from around the web and organize them by your favorite teams. If you want to stay as up to date on our Philadelphia Flyers or the NHL in general, make sure to check out SportsSpider.com. The link is in the description for both the video and the audio versions of this podcast. SportsSpider.com. All right, let's get right into it. So one piece of Flyers news that we do want to address before we get into the young guy conversation. The long-awaited Cam York signing has finally occurred a couple days ago. York came in at a very modest 5 years, 5.1 per or 5.1 million per year with no trade clause, no contingency plan to, in his, no protection for him really over his contract. And I think it surprised everybody a little bit, not so much the AAV, but really the term. I think most people thought if he was going to get something around 5 years, it would be somewhere around 6+ million. Danny Briere was pretty, I could say a little bit ruthless in this one, and gave the kid, a very fair contract at 5.1 million per year. But this was very much re-signing that, York wanted to stay and they wanted to keep him, but they also kind of leave it open that if they have to move this contract, it's incredibly movable, especially as the cap space continues to go up. Becomes really interesting as far as what's York's future here. But at least here for sure over the next two plus years, he will be here as a consistent player. We'll see how things evolve over time, but nice to get him locked up, especially because the Flyers really don't have many players, especially young ones beyond York and Drysdale at the NHL level that project to be top 4 defenders or are even playing a top 4 role. Vasili, I'll go to you first, then we'll let Steve chime in. Anything you want to add to the York signing?
Yeah, I was just a little bit surprised on the term, just like how you mentioned, Yariv, right? For the 5.15 million cap hit, obviously to get the 5 years, I think a lot of people weren't expecting that type of deal for York. I think most people probably expected it to be a bet on yourself type of deal from Cam York and his agent, in the sense of either, hey, let's do a 1-year deal at this fair, 5 million type of cap hit, or maybe even a 2-year deal where you're still under RFA control, and then we can, get you on that long-term deal after you kind of prove it, right? So I thought it was going to be something like that, more of a prove it type deal. But it looks like York, I mean, wanted to obviously lock himself up here long term with the Flyers. If anybody watched the press conference with him just after the signing, he said a big factor was him just wanting to be in Philadelphia in general. He likes the vision of the team, sees where things are going. I think too, the fact that you have, Trevor Zegras on the team now as well, Jamie Drysdale that are really close friends of his. I don't know if that factors into it, but I think when you think about that, probably from his perspective, he's probably, weighing those options as well, saying, hey, I have two of my best buddies here. We might potentially be able to, build this team up together, us three in prominent roles. So I think that was probably enticing to him. But just for the deal in general, I thought it was a pretty fair contract for both sides, right? Like you look at York's production over his career, like his first real full season over 30 games when he played 54 games back in 2022-23, had 20 points. And then in 23-24, he had 30 points in 82 games with 10 goals. And then last season, in only 66 games, he gets 17 points, right? So a little bit of a drop off for him last season. And I think that's why the Flyers can, get this 5-year deal at $5.15 million. I think if he would have put up another 30 plus point season, it probably would have been harder for them to lock him down for the 5 years with this type of AAV. So I think it's a really good deal for the Flyers, just in terms of the fact that you lock down a guy that's proven in the past that he can play on a top pair, play against some of the best players on the other team and do a pretty good job defensively. I think what Philadelphia is probably looking for going ahead is just that offensive game from him to kind of start rounding into form a little bit more, maybe showing some more power play prowess. And you have to factor in, right? Like he was the quarterback for USN TDP when him and Trevor Zegras were on that same team. So maybe they can rekindle some of that magic on the Flyers power play and kind of get it out of the basement. But one thing I wanted to note as well that was really interesting for me just about York is that now with him signed for the next 5 years, you have him and Sanheim locked up at 11.4 million total. So you have guys that are probably like a second defenseman maybe in Sanheim, a number 2, and then a number 3 in York at 11.4 million. That's pretty good in terms of value, I would say, and just in regards to like the salary and cap hit that you're kind of spending on those players. And one thing too, right? Like you mentioned, Yariv, if something, ever comes up where there might be an enticing trade on the table, the no trade protection really allows you to be flexible, right? You could dangle him in a deal. You could move him out if you want to, allocate that money elsewhere. So I think from all facets, there's really not much to complain about the deal. I think Briere didn't, he didn't really tie his hands because there's no trade protection, really movable contract. So let's say for some reason it doesn't work out with York, you can always trade him down the line. But I think it's good value for a young player that hasn't really even entered his prime yet as a defenseman.
Yeah.
What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, so I was gonna say, Steve, as an outsider and as somebody who's watched him through his like juniors career as well, what do you think about York and his current contract?
Well, I like York. I'm rooting for him. I've been rooting for him for a while.
Yeah.
Like Vasili said, going back to the NTDP, and he's had his ups and downs. Not all of it his fault. I think he dealt with injuries. There was the Flyers contending. When he got drafted, the Flyers were pretty much in the mix, at least the next season. The dollar amount was a little surprising because two reasons. One, if they want to blame towards fine. He was kind of like in a little bit of a doghouse, but then he isn't that far removed from being in the minor leagues. So he really only has one full season under his belt. And so it's a gamble, but I think that's where the Flyers overpaid in a way. Well, you know what? I take that back because $5 million, whatever it is, it's the new $2 million because the cap's going up. So it's really, in the grand scheme of things, we're just going to see these contracts go up and up and up. And you saw this year's free agent market was putrid for defensemen. So why would you want to go and shop around and overpay for some guy that's not familiar with the city and the organization? So I understand that. They also had to pay for UFA years as well. And we saw with Sanheim, he wasn't the most popular guy for several years, and then he kind of blossomed. And with defensemen, that really does happen. Where so York being only 24 years old, he hasn't even really reached his prime yet. I mean, he could be like a guy that hits his stride. I mean, Nick Lidstrom. I'm not comparing it to Lidstrom, but as an example, Nick Lidstrom was good when he first came up, but he wasn't Nick Lidstrom until his like late 20s is when he became one of the top 3 defensemen of all time. So I like the move. I like locking him down. The onus is really going to be on York though, because this is really a reward. It's more like a reward, but also there's a lot of it is for his potential. They want to see him be that like trustworthy regular guy. I don't know if he's going to be the guy that's going to put up points. Maybe it all depend on the type of attack the Flyers are going to have on their target. Are you going to add, you got Zegras in the mix now. You got Dvorak in the mix now. So there's a little bit more punch this year. And maybe you'll see York's numbers climb into that 35, 40 point range. And then you could say, hey, he's playing 20 minutes a night. He's under 25 years old. He's a homegrown kid. And, maybe the belief is that his best years are still ahead of him.
Right.
That the last like 5 or 6 years between the injuries and the torch stuff and the coaching changes and all I think, if the Flyers are going to take that next step, they view him as not necessarily a core piece, but reliable. And he really, so I think the one thing is the points are going to come really more, I think, from his defense and his first pass than what we used to see, when he was drafted, where he was able to go coast to coast and, stuff like that. So I like the, probably the best thing I like is that they're not tied to it, that the owner, they'll have the money, they'll have cap space. They're Definitely, not tied to it. They could, if he doesn't perform, there's going to be, look at some of the trades we've seen. People always like, oh, you can't trade him. He's immovable. Nope. Everybody is pretty much movable one way or another. Even if you have to entice it or sweeten it with a pick or something. So to wrap it all up, it was a solid signing. Good. The cap is manageable. And again, I don't really have a problem with the term that much because you had to buy UFA years, and he's, you could always move him if it doesn't work out.
Yeah, and I always saw it as York like a lot. There were a lot of trade rumors about him, and one of the things I was saying is not so much that I want to get rid of York, but I'm like, is there a way to upgrade the D? Like he could be a package, part of a package deal where he's a young, like the name Bowen Byron was out there. Apparently he wants a bunch of money, which is kind of an issue. But like, something like that where you look for a guy with a more offensive scoring punch, maybe even a little bit bigger. And,
I'm sorry, I'm laughing. I thought about him crying when he was putting on the silver medals. Yeah. I'm sorry.
I do actually remember. I actually remember that. That's
he was crying. Hey, listen,
I know.
That drops his value.
It's a tough sport, but he was crying, man.
I thought you were laughing because I brought up Bowen Byron.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, he was crying.
Well, I thought you meant just like in general that it's like a hilarious thing to want to trade for Byron.
No, because like the thing is I have the picture like on my phone from like 2020. So, you just go through your pictures like, oh, let me find this picture. I always come across it. I'm like, I really should delete that.
You just can't help yourself.
If you laugh
so this is an image of Bowen Byron crying, putting on the medal.
Yeah.
Is really just burned into my
the GM should just bring that up in trade negotiations and say, here, look at this guy.
Put it on the Jumbotron, like when on his first game.
You want $7.5 million, $8 million a year?
Well, look at this.
How about
this?
6.25.
So I interrupted you, though.
No, it's all good. But those were always just like the thought that I personally had. But I'm glad they locked him up. I think the Flyers, if anything, they need to beef up their defense still. So, making sure at least you have York and Drysdale and Sanheim and at least those 3 guys. I think, Risto's injuries and all that create a problem. They still probably need another top pairing defenseman just on the surface level unless Drysdale or York become that. But really, it's better to have a guy like that in your system than, like you said, look for him in free agency because free agency is awful unless you're getting a guarantee, like a Mitch Marner type where, you're overpaying, but at least he's like top 5 in the league at his position. It's kind of most of the time you're just overpaying. So good to see there. So Let's move on from Cam York and let's get into the real meat and potatoes of the draft. And we want to review the Flyers' recent draft picks. There had been a bunch of opinions going around. We had the pre-draft show. We did talk about Porter Martone in that show. We talked a lot about the top guys that were kind of slated. It's hard to go through everything. We did talk a little bit about second round pick guys, but now the Flyers have fully selected their squad. A draft that I am actually very happy with, especially when I look at the overall prospect system that the Flyers have. There's still some holes in there, but I do think it looks really good on paper. We'll go through each one of those players, and then we'll review a depth chart of the Flyers that Vasili and I kind of brain melded together. And then Steve has his own. So we'll kind of talk about that a little bit of how we see things from a depth chart ranking of these prospects. Maybe we have some players, that should be on there. Maybe some shouldn't. We'll see. So let's get into the first round and let's talk about the big one. And that is Porter Martone taken 6th overall in the draft. I think the Flyers went a little bit on a curveball once again, drafting Porter Martone instead of not taking the center, James Higgins, who was the top center available at that position. They went for, the best winger in the draft, which didn't fill their center need, but a need that probably every team has is having a big, sizable winger with the ability to score goals and make plays and score from in tight. Steve, what can you tell us about Porter Martone, and how do you feel about the Flyers pick?
Well, I was a little surprised
Yeah.
with the pick because I felt that they mean the Flyers, that they were looking at the center position as the absolute priority. And we talked about that last podcast. I know that Brierian brought it up, because he was asked at multiple press conferences, and he said, everybody knows center's not our strongest position. We need to upgrade it, etc. So, clearly they had a plan in place that included drafting a center. But I think the argument will always boil down to what exactly makes the best player available. What exactly is it? So the way I did my rankings was I had Higgins as the best player available because he outproduced and outperformed Martone head to head. They faced against each other 3 times, and he was the better player. And I think, being the number 1 center on the NTDP, being the number 1 center for Boston College, those are big deals. Whereas Martone, I think, was one like a hair. Remember, I ranked Higgins 2, I ranked Martone 4. So it wasn't that big of a gap. And the fact is, though, at the end of the day, the Flyers drafted the best winger out of an entire draft class. Okay, so yes, they're loaded at wing, specifically right shot, right wing. And that was when I was doing my analysis. I was saying, are they really going to draft another right shot, right wing? They have, they just locked up Konechny. They have, Forster that they love. They have Mitchkov can play the right wing. They have Brink. They have Tippett. And that's just at the NHL level. Then you look at what they have down in the farm with Barkey and Tuamala, and again, these guys are not Martone. So but I'm just saying is in terms of the competition.
Yep.
So when the dust settles, you're at the end of the day, it's really a fine line between Higgins and Martone. And that Martone, you can make a billion excuses or reasons for taking him instead of a center. I don't agree with it. I would have went for the center, but again, at the end of the day, they got a damn good hockey player. And who's to say that Martone in 3 years, not only will he be a everyday Flyer, he'll be a great NHL player or a very good NHL player, soon to be a great NHL player. So I compared it to Matt Tkachuk. You can't say, oh, this kid's going to be like Matt Tkachuk and then say, oh, it was a terrible pick. So his leadership abilities, his intangibles, those are important. When I watch him play during the season, all right, turns the puck over a ton. He had to do a lot for that team. They had a lot of injuries this year, Brampton did. The only, I guess, if I'm going to have any concern, it's going to be he's got a tough fight ahead of him to beat out all these wings, right? These kids, like we said before, they're not going to just roll over and let the job go to him. I mean, you got Bump pushing hard. You're going to have Barkey pushing hard, among others. And then you have the other kids that they drafted. That was the other surprising thing. We'll get into that. But really just a great prospect, a tremendous prospect, a power forward with outstanding vision and hands and just around the net. He's phenomenal around the net. Maybe one of the best wings I've ever seen from a prospect standpoint at making plays near the net, not like, in the slot, not off the rush, like literally from a standstill, like with his back turned. He's a really tricky player in that sense. So he says he's going to make the team. He wants to make the team out of camp. I have no problem with them giving him the 9 games. But we still have to wait and see. Is it going to be college? Going back to, what? The only reason why I see him going back to Brampton, to be honest with you, is like he wants to win an OHL title because he's been there 3 years and maybe he has good friendships and stuff there. But at this point, go to college, man. Get the money and freaking,
yeah.
That's
what I would do. And, you brought up what the Flyers wanted. I kind of looked at it as like, if he was a center, he would have been an easy, that makes sense, right? So they're kind of like, well, the only thing he isn't that we love is a center. Everything else we love about him. And I feel like that's kind of what it came down to.
Definitely.
Sure.
One thing too, Yariv, to add, like, I think a big thing, at least for the Flyers, and not being so married to target a center, is that Zegras trade. Like, apparently, getting him at the center position allowed them to reevaluate potentially not selecting a center and opened up the possibility of Martone, right? So he was available to them at that point, and then they went with the best player they thought that was available on their board. So I think at least just from their perspective and why they did it, if you look at it and you say, hey, Zegras is the center that we wanted, and we have him now, who was apparently supposed to be the best winger in the draft class, they thought that was a good move to make. Obviously, time will tell, and we'll see what James Higgins turns into and what Martone eventually turns into. But I think that was the Flyers' thinking and their rationale behind a lot of it.
Yeah, I think that definitely opened the door on the conversation, right? But to Steve's point, the focus never really left off of center because they aggressively went for a center with their second pick in the draft, trading the 22nd and the 31st pick in the draft, all the way up with a rival, which is even crazy, which I suspect maybe led to them having to overpay a little bit, just trading with the Pittsburgh Penguins specifically, who, I look at what the Penguins really needed, and they had a pretty barren prospect pool. They definitely loaded up in this draft, which Dubas is kind of in a precarious situation because he has to stay competitive with the ancient guys they have and at the same time rebuild on the fly. So I think he kind of bid on that too, the opportunity to turn 1 first-round pick into 2. So the Flyers moved up and drafted Jack Nesbitt. Obviously, this has been a very controversial pick. I was definitely like, Jack Nesbitt, I was like, he was like ranked in the 20s. Yeah. And then you kind of do the research on, the public scout opinion, or not the public, the NHL scout opinions that are represented through Bob McKenzie's draft. You see that there actually were a lot of NHL scouts that did have him around the 15 to 17 range. No matter what, like the overall public display of it, there was a strong need for it. And we were talking prior to this, there were teams that were looking to trade up to grab him. We didn't watch a lot of Jack Nesbitt, Steve. I saw some of it at Dev Camp, just watching the videos. Personally, I really love the player. It's very easy for me to ignore where a player is drafted. And I always say this when we go into the draft. It's like, I don't really care where you draft. You just got to hit. It doesn't even have to be the best player in the draft, but they have to be valuable players for their organization, and you can't miss. The Flyers have had some misses, more under the last regime prior to when Flair was here, but it's kind of like even the York and Caulfield thing. It's like, okay, yeah, we didn't draft Caulfield, but at least we got a valuable top 4 defenseman. Like, that's where I don't complain too much. It's like, I just want to make sure we get a good player. So what can you tell us about Jack Nesbitt? And what do you think about the pick in general? And don't hesitate to knock, moving up in the draft, because if you listen to majority of Flyer fans, at least on Twitter, they're pretty unhappy about it. Having said that, I will say the way they approached the draft and the players that we'll talk about next, they did essentially kind of make up for trading away the 31st pick with the type of players they took later on. So, but what can you tell us about Nesbitt?
Well, I like Nesbitt. I had him ranked 22nd. And I put him in that, I guess you want to call it a secondary tier of centers. So I didn't agree that Misa was a standalone by himself. We already went through that. I thought that Misa, Frondell, Desnoyers, Hagens. Well, I forgot Hagens. And then maybe with the recency bias, like maybe no, that was the secondary. That was the first tier. The second tier was like Martin, O'Brien,
McQueen.
I wasn't really high on him, but like I thought that Martin and O'Brien were kind of like by themselves in like this like kind of in between tier. And then you had I guess a tertiary tier that had like a million centers, and I put them all together. Right, you could start with Potter, Yastrin. If you want to count Ice Wozniak as a center, which he is, he played center this year for Luleå. Cole McKinney, Nesbitt was in there. Kindle, Coots, Reshny. To me, they were all like pretty much lumped in, and I was tracking them all year. I was trying to figure out what I ranked them. I heavily loaded up the centers in the first round as best as I could. So I definitely did not see him as a prospect to trade, one extra first round pick to move up to grab. I viewed him as a guy that teams were going to want. In my mock draft, I had him going to the Rangers at 12. So I had him going 12 from a mock draft standpoint to the Rangers. That's only because the Rangers have nothing going on in center ice. I mean, they got Kerry Terrence, but so I was like, the Rangers, knowing how they draft with the jury and the size and the toughness, they're going to want someone like Nesbitt.
That's crazy, though, Steve, that you mocked him at 12 and you actually did go 12 just to a different team.
I mean, I don't know. Like, I mean, would the Rangers have selected him? Who knows if they kept the pick? So that's basically it. Now, as far as Nesbitt, the player himself, though, so if you dug deeper into, I had to dig deep into the data this year, more so than in the past, because everything was so close. So I'm looking for other reasons. I can't just go by eye test and say, oh, he looks great. Eye test wise, Nesbitt looks very good. He looks pro level. He has pro level or pro caliber traits in his IQ, his playmaking, his stick handling. But the I won't even call them underlying numbers, but like there are a couple of things that I consider to be concerning, which is why I wouldn't put him in that upper tier or that secondary tier. And the big one was that he only had 9 5-on-5 primary assists all season. Now, he wasn't always the number one center, right? He didn't always play with Greentree and Protas, who are two of the top scorers in the OHL, but he saw plenty of ice time. I mean, he was on the PP1, and then as the season progressed, he got more ice time. He produced more, and then in the playoffs, he was really like a permanent fixture with those two wings, because Windsor blew a 3-0 lead. They were desperate. And I think I said in the previous podcast that we did, where he was probably, like, without a doubt, Windsor's best forward when the world was collapsing around them. So that might have played into it. But at the same time, you look at so I know Briere called him a goal scorer. Well, I don't know if I go to call him a goal scorer. He had he had 9 goals in his last like 38 or 39 games. And that's on like 120 shots. It's like a 6.5% shooting percentage. So I don't know where the goal scoring part comes in, except for that it can be a net front presence. He's got good hands, but I see him as a pass first playmaker. I don't want this guy doing a whole lot of shooting, especially with all the wing prospects the Flyers have who could finish. Now, as far as the trade, to trade up to get him, I think there were 2 factors. The big one being the centers that went. So if I recall correctly, the trade, in my opinion, I don't know if I could prove this, but the trade was planned beforehand, right, by the Flyers staff. I think they probably war gamed it if the centers that they want are gone. What is our contingency? I think that this is too big of a billion-dollar industry for teams not to think this way, for them to be like, hey, we're going to go for this guy. This is our list. But what happens if our goal to get a center, and we need a center in the first round, we have 3 first-round picks. What happens if like our top 7 guys are gone by the time, because I think everybody knew that by 22, a lot of these guys were going to be gone anyway. Right. And so the plan was, and again, this is my theory, that when they saw the centers go for 1 through 5, and there's no way that they weren't obsessed with one of Martin or Misa or Frondel or Desnoyers. They had one of those guys at the top of their list. And so once those guys are falling off the board, Briere even said in his press conference, he said, well, the centers, they were really flying off the board or something along those lines. So I think that when you saw O'Brien, like obviously Higgins was going to go, when you saw it went Higgins, and then I think it went O'Brien, and then Murtagh, the righty D, and then McQueen, that's when in a way, I think the Flyers panicked. Not really panicked, but that triggered the contingency to trade up. I don't care what it costs, trade up. Now, in the last time 2 first-round picks were packaged to move up in the first round was 2008. And that was when I believe Buffalo, packaged, I want to say it was like 22 and like 30 or like, 19 and 28 to Buffalo. Buffalo packaged that to Anaheim so they could draft Tyler Myers at 12, right? And then Anaheim ended up with Jake Gardner and someone else. And, you could argue all day about those two. The other close, I guess, was recent when Arizona moved 27, like 34 and 45 to go all the way up to 11 and take Connor Geeky, the big center. And so I think the San Jose package was Bstead, a center who's very good, and then 2 defensemen, Havilland, Cam Lund and Havilland. Cam Lund's very good too. So we could argue, who's worth more now, later, but there was precedent. So it wasn't like the Flyers were, basically, over. Initially, it looked like an overpayment, but it was to move up to that spot market value. I just don't think that Nesbitt was worth that extra first-round pick because, in my opinion, there are centers that were taken after him that, maybe could have fallen a little bit, or maybe like Zanon or, McKinney. He went too late, by the way. People are going to regret passing on that kid, I think. So I think it was a mix of, we need our center. We like Nesbitt, but hey, if we don't make this move now, there are going to be no centers left for us at 22. Yeah. You know what I mean? So did they have to go to a 12? Did they have to go to 12? Right?
Well, I just to that point, to also what you're saying, the centers, I feel like when Pittsburgh saw McQueen go off the board, they were willing to get rid of that pick at that point too, because I think they saw
and they reached though on Kindle though at 11.
Right. Yeah. Which it was a little weird. What's the difference between Kindle and Reshny too? Like, and Reshny went
barely nothing.
Right. So
nothing.
I was thinking about that, but that's why I thought like McQueen was their guy, hoping they could get him.
Yeah.
And when they saw he was gone, they're like, okay, we'll move the pick to the Flyers, like that type of thing.
Yeah, and then
there's a lot of stuff to think about.
Hold extra value too over the Flyers just because they're in the same division, right? Like I think the Flyers probably had to pay a premium to move up with Pittsburgh versus like what a Nashville would have paid. Maybe what a Detroit would have paid, right?
Yeah.
I think what really happened too is, to your point, Steve, like the Flyers they knew they needed a center. They saw centers dropping off the board like O'Brien, like McQueen, even like Kendall, for example. And they said, hey, if we don't make some sort of move here, we know teams are interested in Nesbitt. Like I think Nashville was trying to trade up, Detroit trying to trade up. So they kind of just were saying, this is our guy. We're going to take the chance and just move up. We'll see if it pays off ultimately. Like they targeted Nesbitt, it seems. That was the center they really were either, enamored with for some reason, or they thought that, hey, like this is a guy that we want to target. I think probably due to his size. So we'll see if that ends up working out. Obviously, the knock I think on him, Steve, is the skating. So I was just wondering, from your perspective, what do you think about that? Like the skating prowess.
I don't care about
Nesbitt?
skating that much. I really don't. I think it's so overrated.
Same.
I know that the coaches and the technicians, the subject matter experts, they think it's an important thing. I've been following the game way too long and seen way too many guys slow as heck, like have great career. I mean, even Gretzky was not fast by the time he was like 30, and he was still absolutely shredding the league. So I think a lot of it has to do more with IQ. So I think Nesbitt has the ability to be, like Briere said, a good 2C. I don't know if he'll ever be that 1C because, again, like I said, I'm just basing that off of the data and the numbers that I mentioned. Like, he never really looked or played like a number one. Like Martone played like a number one top line wing.
Like he's not commanding that same space out there. Well, obviously, Martone is. Yeah.
You know what I look at, Steve? I look at the jump of production from year 1 to year 2. It's so drastic. Like he went from 18 points in 58 games, minus 32, to 64 points in 65 games, so plus 12 in one season.
Yeah. The whole team got better. The whole team improved.
Okay.
Like they went from being great to stinking to being great again.
Okay.
So I think that kind of ties into it.
Yeah.
But a lot of it, like I said, like he has a lot of power play assists, secondary power play assists. He playing with a lot of firepower, I think helped the spike. But like he definitely showed in spurts that he can take over a line and he could run a possession and he could be a problem for the opposition. He definitely showed that, just not consistently. More so in the second half than the first half.
Well, I think they saw him as raw, like a little bit. Like, do
you trade? But that therein lies the rub. Like, do you trade 22 and 31 to get a guy like that? Because remember that you got to now look at not just centers. You got to look at who was picked between 13 and freaking
like Eklund,
38.
Atchison. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean that's the one thing, and that and not to get too much into the what it woulda, coulda, shoulda, and try to predict stuff that is maybe seems a little out there. But in this day and age with social media, like this poor kid, he was asked, like, hey, people weren't like along the lines of like, hey, people weren't like thrilled about your pick, and the show was controversial. And he was like, I don't care. I'm gonna do whatever I can to prove people wrong. And that's the right answer. I'm sure he's been trained to say that. Yeah. He seems like a good kid. They all are, but like, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
What's going to happen when, look at Hagens. He told, I forgot who it was. Apparently they said at the draft that he told people he let people down this year. That doesn't happen if he was covered in a different way. If he was covered in a more positive light, as he should have been.
You're absolutely right.
Like, for Hagens to think I let people down
because you went 7th overall.
That is ridiculous.
Yeah,
it just shows that media narrative can get to some of these.
It's sad, obviously. But again, so what happens now? Like the World Juniors, right? And he makes a mistake, and so that's the one thing that you got to worry about. But if he's got a strong enough support group and he just delivers, that's going to be critical for him. I think he has to be better than Luchenko was for Guelph this season. Put it that way. I think he has to be like legit one of the top players in the CHL. If he stays in the CHL with all these kids going to college, who knows?
Yeah.
But the pick is in, right? They spent what they spent. I would not have made that move, but he's a flyer, and you gotta just root for the kid.
You know what I see in him, and I want you to correct me if this is way off base. I think about a guy like Keith Primeau, who was never a number one by the numbers, number one center especially in Philadelphia. Maybe he had a little bit better seasons production wise in Detroit, but in Carolina, he kind of came over here. He was the number one center, but he put up like 60 points a year. He wasn't like dominant offensively, but he was a motor. He never was an amazing skater, but when he got his feet moving, he's about the same size. He was a 6'5", big body, hardworking, leadership type, could play make, could score, could kind of do everything around the net. It's actually kind of how he has his big moments where all goals around the net. That's kind of what I saw his comparison to be, which again, I think is not a true number one center, like
Yeah.
top 10, 15 guy in the league, but a guy who can play against the best players in the world, just be a pain in the ass to play against. Like that's what I kind of saw when we talk.
Yeah.
And then Wayne Simmons compared him to a young Sean Couturier, and I feel like that's why the Flyers were so enamored with it. Is like they were really looking for like that type of player. Like that Rod the Bod, that Keith Primeau, that Sean Couturier. We always have one of those guys, right? It's why they loved Chris Gratton back in the day and traded to get him, or went were so all about him.
Gratton was
Right. He didn't meet the bill, but again, you can see they're
that one
always
year.
chasing.
Yeah, that 1 year.
But I just mean they're always chasing that big body, hardworking centerman.
Yeah, yeah.
And I feel like that's why they were so enamored with Nesbitt. And if he hits, even if he's taking a 12 and he's not an 80-point player in the league, right? Even if he's just a 60-point guy, I think people will be pretty thrilled with it if he has a Keith Primeau like effect on the team. That's kind of
yeah, absolutely. I mean, Primo. I mean, I buy it with Primo. Like he could become that. Primo was a very high draft pick. He was part of a very, very deep Yager, Owen Nolan, Nedved.
One of the best drafts. Yeah.
And the Red Wings waited and waited and waited. They put him on wing. They had him at center. They didn't really need Primo because they had freaking Yzerman and Fedorov. And he kind of was like a late bloomer. Like he really found his game. He had one good year in Detroit, but again, like the dead puck era was suited for guys like Gratton and Primo. So if the league, and listen, we might see another dead puck era. I know we just had this offensive boom a couple of years ago with the 330 goals, like it was the 80s again. But I don't know if teams keep drafting like the way they've been drafting the last couple of years, they're passing over skill for size. Now Nesbitt's case, he has both, so it could work. It could really work out. And again, maybe the Flyers are like, we are loaded at the wing. We have guys on the wing that can do it on their own from the defensive zone all the way down. Bump can do it. Martone can do it. Mitchkov can do it. There's a lot. So what does really, I don't think you want a guy like Nesbitt to be like this godly franchise type center, although I still think the Flyers need to freaking find one. Okay. So whether it's, they think Zegras could become that, or they think Nesbitt could become that, we'll have to wait and see. Luchenko too. We can't forget about him. So maybe that's the strategy. Like we are so loaded at the wing that we just want our centers to do X, Y, Z, not to be this like everything runs through this one person. Like let's say, well, not honestly Pittsburgh with Crosby, but like Chicago with Taves, or pick any team like Islanders with Barzal, the Bruins when it was just Bergeron. Maybe that's how they see it, and it's fair. It's fair. I think that they could have found a Nesbitt type center
lower
at 22 and at 31. But again,
but now with size, right? It would have been they would have been probably smaller, like around 6'1".
Yeah. But if they specifically said, no, we want to get bigger.
Oh, yeah.
Then it's completely fine.
It's obvious they did.
They're not saying that. They're not admitting to that, and it's making someone like me upset.
Yeah, because it's
admitted.
Yeah.
Well, look at their strategy, right? Like I'm pretty sure, except for Westergard, like everybody was over 6 feet, right?
And Quinn.
Quinn.
Yeah.
There you go.
So but they were the later picks.
Quinn's very good, by the way.
Oh yeah, I can't. That's actually what I'm really looking for too. I'm sorry, Vasili, I didn't mean to cut you off. I really want to hear what he has to say about the other guys too that we don't know. Like everybody heard a lot about Nesbitt and Martone and even like Murtagh and Vansaghi, but even the other guys, like I'm interested in all of them.
Yeah, we'll talk about them.
Yeah, Vasili, I'm sorry. Did you have anything more to say about Nesbitt before we move on?
No, let's move on to the other guys. All good.
Okay, cool. Okay, so the second round, at least on my surface level analysis, not knowing too much, but starting to learn more about these guys and obviously looking into them. And Vasili and I both, we already went back and forth on them last episode. We're starting to learn more about these guys. We'll learn more about them, but we didn't have the luxury of watching them this whole time like you did and seeing them in context and, So I think they had an exceptional second round. They obviously went for size. That is, you're delusional if you think otherwise, the second round. But I do think that it was a home run of a combination of size, skill, upside, and they touched on a bunch of needs. And we're going to go through that with the depth chart too. And I put together like a starting lineup thing too of prospects. I want to show you that too. But yeah, let's go for the first one, and that's Carter Amico, the big defenseman, 6'6". I love this pick. I'm going to let you break it down because we already did. But I am personally kind of maybe even a little too excited for this type of defenseman. But I think the Flyers desperately needed somebody like Amico.
Yeah, I don't know. I had him ranked in like the 71, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's the trend you'll see that with the Fly, except for Murtagh and Gard. I thought that the Vansaghi and the Amico picks were reaches. But so here's my thing with this. This is why I found it puzzling, is that Amico only played about a quarter of the season, right? He got hurt. I think he got hurt at the either right before the Five Nations tournament or at the November Five Nations tournament. And if you watched him play in the college games before that, I mean, there's two ways to interpret how he plays. You could say this guy is a freaking nightmare to defend, to prepare for, because he's this 6'6", 6'7", whatever he is, skating like the wind in a way like I don't want to compare him to Salayev, because Salayev was
the rush from last year's
that
draft.
kid was like a legit shutdown. You're not scoring on me defenseman. But you see there's like two sides to Amico. You see that side where he's like trucking dudes and like skating up ice. And then you have the structure, right? You have the sloppiness and the decision-making and the puck management. So I didn't think he played like, because he was supposed to be like a borderline R1 pick heading into the season based off of his U17 performance. Now, Flair said before the draft that he had a press conference. I think it might have been the pre-draft, pre-lottery conference maybe, where he mentioned, like, he was asked about tiers, and he talks about Schaefer. He's like, oh, no one's going to, Schaefer's the best. And then he goes, he was talking about injuries. And then the first word out of his mouth was Amico. Like, I was like, that's kind of random to just mention Amico. And he said that, oh, we watched him on film and we liked his U17 season. He said this a month and a half before the draft. So clearly they like this kid. And a lot of us liked him. It's just that the combination of the project, right? And Wang was the same way. Now, I think that the Flyers probably, and again, this is my speculation, this is why they shouldn't have traded the two picks, but I think that they love Brustovich, who played with Bonk. How could you not love Brustovich?
The London Knight, yeah.
He was a legit shutdown, high IQ, physical, mobile, like he's like a Brock Faber. Like, that's the kind of game he plays, right? If you ask me who's better, who had a better season, who has the better upside, Amico or Brustovich, I just say Brustovich by a mile. But he went in the late first round, and then Wang went early in the. So even though he's a lefty, who's the other guy? I'm looking at my list. Okay, well, then Rumbach went, and so now with these really first round. Now again, the Flyers don't necessarily need righty lefty at this point, right? Like, there's a balance after last year's draft of the last two drafts. Although they got rid of Sutherland and Mann, still there was a balance. Like, there's not a whole lot on the left side. So you could say, like, dude, you draft a lefty defenseman, that's fine. It was a couple years ago where they needed to address the right side. But I think maybe they were targeting one of those guys. What made this pick puzzling to me was Fiddler. So you're going to trade down to just two spots with Fiddler there. You could have drafted Fiddler, who, with all due respect to Amico, like, Fiddler's just he's the better defenseman. He's better, higher IQ, better poise. He was the legit number one on the strength Edmonton team. So whereas Amico never really played like the number one in the NTDP. I think he was the first NTDP defenseman off the board, right? At when the Flyers took him. So that was my problems with the pick. Like, but at the same time, they gained 10 spots and they got Gard, who I like a lot. So maybe you say he's a center. So you say, hey, we Amico and Gard versus, let's say, I don't know, Fiddler and some other center. Maybe you could. But so the thing with Amico though, he's going to be you. He's got to stay. He's got to like make sure he's 100% healthy and not like, oh, he was at the combine. I'm talking about like in-game stuff.
Sure.
I think for BU with that great goalie that they have, the Devil draft pick, Yegoro, BU is going to be a machine this year. If he just settles into that role as the shutdown, smothering, control the gray zone, control below the dots, don't try to be a hero and deliver the massive hit. Because he could really, when he's unbridled, he could be really out of control. So I think the Flyers are going to try to like say, hey, you go to college, learn, develop more structure, and then, when you come to the AHL, we'll unleash you on the rest of the league.
Yeah, so they're kind of banking on that injury and the time lost that he maybe could have made up for some of that raw side of his game, but never really got to. So they're kind of like, we're going for tools.
He did improve in the second half, so he could have been part of the solution. Yeah. I agree.
Okay. I really think too, moving up 10, like back into the late second was a big factor for them on that trade. Like I think they probably did like Fiddler and were thinking about maybe making that pick, because I had them even potentially taking Fiddler like in the first round in my mock draft, right? I thought he was even a first round option. So I think just the ability to maybe get back into that late second round was probably really enticing for them. And they were like, hey, you have Fiddler, who's a really sizable defense, and we have Amico that we like too. And he was projected to maybe be around one type of guy without the injuries. Yeah. So like, hey, let's take the swing on two guys versus the one, maybe.
Yeah, but clearly I will take that to my grave that they loved his game and they were willing to overlook, not necessarily overlook, but it wasn't that big of a deciding factor in terms of the injury, because Wang was a mess when he first got to the OHL. You know what I mean? And he was like the quintessential project defenseman, because he went from the OJHL to the OHL and he's big and he could skate but you know what? Hey, listen, all right. So I wrote it down. There were something like, with size, that only 13% of the entire draft class was under 6 feet.
That's crazy.
So
nuts.
The whole NHL is prioritized.
Wait, this was it though. 14 of the top 39 picks, right? So it's right after Amico, and then you had Kettles. 14 of the top 39 picks were 6'4" or taller, and 12 of those 14 were 6'5" or taller.
So I wonder if it's a copycat league, Steve. Like just looking at the Florida Panthers and what they're doing, right?
Fortin admitted, Jerry Fortin, the Sabres scouting director, he basically admitted, he's like, oh, recency bias from the playoffs. Recency bias from the playoffs.
I think there's a lot of that, but also 3 years in a row, Florida has made it to the finals with that type of lineup. But we did have this conversation,
and they're all 30 though. They're all like 28 and older though.
So. Well, I say this stuff on the podcast all the time. It's not a young man's game, because a young man implies that you have an advantage, and they don't. And size matters. And we kind of talked about this a little bit, and it's like, it's an extremely physical game. It's not like you can only be big. That's not going to work today, right? Your skating matters, and that's how smaller guys
need to complement your skill with these bigger guys.
But I think
absolutely up the pucks.
And let's be honest, a lot of these guys are not going to be taken even in the second round. They're not going to be like, it's just the odds of history.
Parts,
right. And it is what it is. But if one of them turns out to be like an Ekblad, a Forsling, like just one of these shutdown guys, that's what guys are going for. Is like they want more of these guys, these smothering defensemen who can keep up with the faster forwards and just be a complete pain in the ass to play against in your zone.
Yeah.
And I think that's the trend that they're chasing, because you look at somebody like Toronto, who I actually think that they also went in this direction in the trade deadline and all that. They also recognize that it's a need. They're like, we're going all in on skill, and then the skill wasn't enough in those really tense physical games. It's like Carolina dealt with that too. It's like, you get smothered by these bigger, stronger teams. Vegas beat teams this way. It's like, there is an advantage in the size department. I think teams are trying to catch up. It's like that type of thing. It's like, we've ignored this a little too long, you know?
That's what it seems like, definitely.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
So let's go for the next second round pick, who I believe has the highest upside of the second rounders, and the guy who already in dev camp definitely stuck out from a skill standpoint, to the point where it makes sense to me that he was mocked in a lot of late first round picks. Jack Murtagh, the center slash winger, and maybe you can.
Nah, he's a wing. He played wing. Yeah.
So go ahead,
I love him. I love him. He was I think I ranked him 19th or 20th overall, really from the very beginning of the season. So with him, now I'm not going to call him Chris Kreider just yet. Kreider had explosive speed at this age,
it was very
but
fast.
stylistically on the puck. So think of like the slowed down version. No, but Murtagh is a very good skater for his size. But picture like not an elite skating Chris Kreider, left shot down the left wing, very similar. Like creates his own shot. He could run the cycle, strong stick handler, plays with a bite. He'll like, mix it up after the whistle. He'll stand up for teammates. He'll give you the extra shove. So he is a blood and guts kind of a sniper. Like he's not just a, oh, you got to get me the puck. Like, oh, well, pass it to me, beaver tap. Like, no, he will collect the puck in the defensive zone and skate it out himself. He'll cut inside, weave around, peel back. So there's a lot of things to like about him. There's the IQ, the size, the now I'll say the shot. Here's the thing. Here's my biggest knock on Murtagh. He could have finished the season with 50 goals. He gets a lot of chances. And a lot of it is because of him, not because of it's not like the NTDP was loaded with elite playmaking centers. They lost Potter to the college, and then Mooney got hurt early in the season. And so McKinney now is the number one center. McKinney's a very good he could be a playmaker, but it's mostly off of hard work and work along the boards and winning battles. That's how McKinney gets a lot of his points. So, but from the skill standpoint, so the NTDP top line was kind of like I don't say it was a patchwork top line. It wasn't what they planned on having. And Murtagh, McKinney, and I want to say Kvasnichka, those smaller guy, that was really for 3/4 of the season, that was the NTDP's top line. So Murtagh is drawing all the top matchups, but he's PP1 and he could freaking sling it. He should have scored more. Maybe like not having the elite Hagens, Keller, Jack Hughes type of NTDP center prevented him from scoring as much as he did, because you could tell him, it's like, hey, dude, just park at the side of the net and I'll feed it to you. A lot of his goals were earned on his own, but at the same time, if he finished what he could have finished, you're looking at a 45, 50 goal NTDP season.
Would you say, Steve, he's more of a shoot first kind of player? Because when I was just researching him a bit, he led the team with 165 shots on net. So he obviously loves to rip the puck, right?
Yeah, but that was, I think, more by necessity.
Okay.
Right. I forgot to mention that Horkoff left to go to Michigan in the middle, although he wasn't that great with the NTDP. It was weird. He was okay with the NTDP, and then he goes to college and is like Michigan's second line center, running the power play. Anyway. I think that it was just by design. I think the coaching staff was like, you really are our best pure goal scorer. So do your thing.
Yeah.
Do your thing. But he could pass the puck. He is a really smart player inside the offensive zone. And similar to Martone, where he could stick handle and you could drape your body all over him, he is not going to lose the puck. So yeah, sometimes he tries to do a little bit too much, but again, I think it's a byproduct of the situation with the NTDP this year. They were just not as dominant as they were. They were trailing early. I mean, you saw what the CHL did to them. The CHL absolutely humiliated them. And I don't have a problem saying that as an American.
Wasn't it 7-2 or something like that?
It wasn't even the score.
It wasn't close.
It was the tilted ice that the NTDP in both games could not get out of their zone.
But they were obviously, like you said, missing a lot of their key guys. So,
well, but still, Murtagh in those two games was phenomenal. He was the best American player. So that helped, with the narrative that, hey, my guys can't do it, I'll freaking do it. And this is a great pick, great value to get him.
What do you think too, Steve? Just last thing on Murtagh. I know he's only 17, one of the youngest players in the draft. Do you think he could you think that is like a main reason why the Flyers even selected him too, because there's still so much more runway for development as well?
I mean that, but I just think he was the best player available. If you look at the players that was still available, like you had there were goalies. We'll get into that maybe. But like Malcolm Spence, I think would have been the logical best player available. I had him ranked 12th. So
Okay.
if I'm in that spot, I take Spence. But Spence is more of a focused 200-foot shutdown PK guy. You know what I'm saying? Whereas Murtagh is a pure offensive type. But they both had size, bite. They'll if they could be physical. But yeah, I think he just was the best player available. I think really they much like Martone, to them they were like, this is what we want. He fell in our laps. We're not going to mess with it.
That's fair. I'm excited about him.
Yeah.
Even more excited now. So let's move on to the next guy, and that's Shane Vansaghi. Doing that. Versace.
Yeah.
Shane Versace. Yeah. Shane Vansaghi, the incredibly physical winger. Yeah, the comparison I've heard about him is like he's Tom Wilson without the same scoring upside.
I saw Marcus Foligno as a comparison.
Yeah, there's this video.
Maroon.
There's this video going
that
around.
Type, just trucking dudes.
There's this video online shared out by Charlie O'Connor. He's one of the biggest Flyers writers in the area, and he captured Vansaghi going to the corner with a camp invite. And Vansaghi throws a shoulder in this kid. This kid just goes flying in the air, like full Superman into the corner. I think even if he doesn't end up being, a good player, he seems like the fans would like him anyway. But it does seem like there's some upside there. What can you tell us about Shane?
All right, so I'm familiar with Vansaghi, dating back to the NTDP, right? So as a draft -1, we saw, first of all, to make the NTDP as a draft -1 is a big deal. He was bottom 6 there, not his fault. It's just how the program works. You know what I mean? Unless you're like some superstar. But you saw like more so, I saw more of his abilities with the puck, which is something I have to look at. I can't just look at these kids for all the physical traits and the hitting. You got to look at what they do with the puck, IQ, poise, things like that. And I saw like examples of skill where like he can make an inside out move. You know what I mean? He could maybe peel back and connect on a cross seam pass. Like, whoa, wow, not bad for a power forward. But those were definitely the exception and not the rule. So going to Michigan State, right off the bat, I knew that there's no way that being one of the youngest kids in college and playing for a top program with title aspirations, that he was going to get into the top 6 unless he went on some insane scoring clip as a bottom 6er, right? That if he's scoring a goal a game, kind of like what happened with Horkoff when he went to Michigan. Like he was not going to be given the keys to the castle, but he earned it. So that's what I think with Vansaghi. I'm like, he's going to be a grinder. He'll fit in great in that program. They play a heavy game. He's a north-south type, loves to hit, battles in the corners hard, like just a net front menace, a pain in the neck, like to really like match up against. And so we saw that in Michigan State, and he fit that role to a T. But as the season wore on, and this was why I knocked him all the way down. I had him in like the 40-50 range earlier in the season, but late in the season, specifically the Big Ten tournament and the NCAA tournament, he played really timid with the puck, where all he was doing was hitting. And although you can't blame the guy if that's what the marching orders are from the bench, but his line produced a lot more offensively. And then as the season wore on, like it was less and less. But it wasn't really about producing as much as what Vansaghi was doing with the puck. He got it. It was off his stick. So there wasn't the poise. There wasn't the playmaking ability. It was more like chip and chase. And then he got to the point where he was doing literally nothing but hitting. He wasn't even touching the puck. That he'd go out in his regular shift, good effort, right? From whistle to whistle. But all he's looking to do is hit guys and hit guys and hit guys. And if you do that and you're a below average skater like he is, you're going to be late on the play if the other team breaks out. And that usually was the case. So that's something that, again, if you draft him specifically to be a Matt Martin or a Pat Maroon, where he's just hitting people, but there's the chance that he could make plays out of those battles, why not? Why not? So I definitely didn't like the pick because I thought it was a little bit too high. I would have went a different direction, but he really is like one of the hardest hitters in the draft. So
Do you think that a lot of these issues are coachable though? Like getting him to hold on to the puck longer, improving his skating.
I think he has the skill, he has the ability to do it, but he has to do it. So
Sure,
now we'll see. I don't know how he looked at Dev Camp. Did he do the drills, which one-on-one? I mean, I don't know how he's going to look in, let's say, a real game with a increased role. But I think he can do it. Then we have to look into the consistency piece. How often does he do it? Is he turning pucks over because he's handling it more? Like little things like that.
How do you
think? But things like that.
Yeah, do you think, Steve, with him just being one of the younger players at Michigan State, like next season he'll have more of an opportunity probably to show some of that skill, get more of those puck touches?
That's what I attributed his treating the puck like a grenade, was that he didn't want to make a mistake. The games were getting more important, and he was being risk averse, which is really, from a fourth liner, it's hard to be upset with that. You want your fourth line. If he's going out there and listen, every time he hits somebody, that's registering in that opponent's brain. Like, oh God, here's this guy again.
He's coming into the corner again to blast.
There you go. Yeah, so in that regard, it's added value, but you just like with the depth that they have already on the wing with the right shots, like they might just tell him, like, you know what, you're going to be a checker, dude, and like
you're going to be our Pat Maroon, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. How do you see him like somebody like when you compare him to like Denver, not Denver, Kaplan? Why is his
Devin
first
Kaplan?
Devin, thank you. I want to say Denver.
Kaplan's more of a smarter player, I think, defensively, positionally.
Okay.
I would say that. Well, I mean, Kaplan's, you didn't really see it at BU, but with the NTDP, he was really he was like a shooter option. I think Vansaghi's got a very good shot. I think he's a good net front guy. He could be a bumper kind of guy too. But they're kind of like different. Like, I don't see Vansaghi being used as a matchup guy against the top line. He's going to be like an energy guy, whereas Kaplan was the top. I mean, he was the guy that they
he's like a perfect third line checker, like shutdown line
middle
guy.
Six, grind like us, but not like a matchup shutdown. Hey, I want you to come, because you got to worry about the foot speed, and I think Kaplan's a little bit quicker.
Okay, fair enough. All right, let's get into the last one. You mentioned him already, that you really like him. He's actually the one that probably is not talked about a lot at all, just because of his numbers specifically, and a lot of it has been explained to us as to why he has lower scoring, especially when you look at the rest of the team. But yeah, Matthew Gard, a very big centerman, seems to be under the radar a really good pick, at least on the surface level, where you're again betting on the situation, not allowing him to excel, offensively. But, the type of player that he was, the type of season that he had, that there's a lot more there to discover on the offensive side.
Yeah, well, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, his team wasn't very deep. They weren't very good. So, you're basically, you're losing before you even started the game. And they were that horrible, but they really could not generate offense. I mean, he was really one of their best players, often the best player, not just with scoring. It was with the defense and key faceoffs, and so he was their main guy. That's why I why we've done these before. Like, I love it when those centers are put in that position. They might not like it because they're losing and they probably want to win. But he handled that pressure and that stress really well, I thought. I'm talking about on ice decision making stuff. So like, where you picture when you're under duress, like he's the kind of guy where, like, it's the end of a shift, he's not going to automatically ice it. Like, he's going to maybe even think about making a play. And he actually had a pretty high rate in the few situations I saw him where he's completely in a bind, and he was able to work his way out of it using his smarts, his reach, his puck handling. So I'd call him a dual threat. He's the kind of guy Team Canada could probably use on their, like, let's say bottom six at a tournament like the World Juniors, where he's a good contingency, because if one of your centers gets hurt, or isn't producing, you want to shake things up. He's the kind of guy that can make things happen like that. So yeah, it's a great pick. I had him ranked around the same range, but he's a center. He's big. He's got skill. He's smart. What else could you ask for?
Seems like an ideal third line center at the NHL level, from what I can tell. Some scoring punch, face offs.
Yeah,
size,
I mean, it's like
grittiness.
Berglund, Nesbitt, Rohonen, Gard. Like they're all kind of like one way or another cut from the same cloth. They're not just good at one thing.
Yeah.
They specialize in multiple things.
A lot of different skill sets, which is good. Like I know Stevie had 19 points his first 26 games, slows down to 17 points the final 40. Is that just based on like the situations he's put in, the fatigue, and going up against the best players every night?
It was just the reality. Is my opinion, because watching him play, you didn't really see him try to do too much. You just saw him try to save shifts. Okay. You know what I mean? I never
really team out of bad situations, almost kind of.
Yeah,
right?
I never really viewed him as the problem on a given shift. Okay. You know what I mean? It was. Listen, I'm going to be honest with you. People are going to think I'm nuts by saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway. That if you compare McQueen's play with Brandon versus Gard's play with Red Deer, it's not all that different. It's not. I'm just talking about, forget about upside and how they project. Okay, fine. McQueen obviously has the higher pedigree, but in terms of what they delivered out of the average shift, I didn't really see that much of a difference between the two of them. I really didn't.
Interesting. And the size is really similar too, obviously. So
yeah.
McQueen is clearly he could be an elite player.
Oh, of course.
There's no doubt. But I'm just saying in terms of what
the actual on ice results and what you saw them both do, right?
Yeah, what the behavior is like during the average shift. Like Gard was definitely I'm gonna try to fix this. I like that.
That's awesome. I like that scouting report. All right, let's move on to the 5th round where the Flyers took 2 guys. And this is the first time they picked under 6 foot tall. But I am very intrigued by this pick because of his age, being September 3rd birthday, and also the fact that he got to play against men in the playoffs at the SHL level. Max Westergard, a speedy winger who seems to be another high IQ player, which was definitely consistent with this draft. What can you tell us about Westergard?
He's a lot of fun. So he definitely played on a loaded team. He played for Frölunda J20. And they had 3 powerful lines. So he wasn't always the top line guy, but that was just a matter of just the depth that they had. So they had, Carl Leutnant Sterner. They had frickin' Ivar Stenberg. They had the Noringer, the kid I loved last year that Central Scouting didn't rank, and the Nashville took him. So they were a freaking potent offense, which is usually par for the course with Frölunda J20. And he uses a very long stick. Now, people will probably remember him he's Finnish. He's got a Swedish last name, and he plays in Sweden, but he's Finnish. And so he played for Finland at the Helenka. He played for Finland at the U18 tournaments. And so he was their main guy, one of their main guys, and a very thin forward year for the Finns, but he was probably one of their best, if not the best. There were others too, who were smaller side, but what he was, the thing about that line, he had different line mates. He played with Hoff, was a center. He played with Stenberg. He played with I forgot the other guy, but anyway, they seemed to really work well. There wasn't a whole lot of puck hogging. There was sharing of the puck, a lot of high flying and fancy rushes that started from back in the zone. So it was almost like a kind of like an NTDP style attack. And he was a big part of it. And, you get both things from him. You get finishing and you get playmaking. His vision is great. He's a power play specialist. He's great in the half wall or along the half wall. He's great behind the net. So he's also a very strong kid, and he's feisty. He likes to battle one-on-one. You see him get into battles with bigger defensemen. So this is not just a finesse, kind of kid who does whatever he wants. Like he's a kid that really could get under the skin. He could and kind of ram it down your throat with the puck on the puck because that's how skilled he is. And then he goes to the SHL playoffs. I mean, think about that for Frölunda to even consider a smaller, if you want to call him small. He's really he's kind of strong. He's muscular frame. That he's not only playing in the playoffs, he actually I think even scored a couple of goals. So yeah, it's a really good pick to make in the later stages of a draft.
Yeah, it seems like this guy could. Hey, it seems a little bit like boom or bust, but it seems like it could be like a home run hit, and maybe even has like top 6 upside if it's like a dream type of pick, right?
You got
like,
bumped out of the 5th round,
right?
You know
Exactly.
I didn't have Westergard rated that. I had him out of my top 100, but he was definitely a guy that like you want to fight for, and you're trying to. I make so many excuses for all these kids but the point is that like he's going to add a significant skill component. Barkey too. If they got to move Barkey left wing, right wing, you can play. It doesn't really matter though. Like when these guys are in the AHL together, whenever he comes over, listen, there are times where he does Mitch Korb type stuff, and I'm not talking about like the little cross goal. I'm saying like stylistically passing the puck through
looking
legs,
guys off, drawing players to him. Yeah,
there's a lot of skill there. There was 2 things that, if we're going to use stats. The first part of the J20 season is broken down into 2 sections before the playoffs. They have the divisional play, North and South, and then they have the seeding bracket, which is called Forts, and the top 10. And it's literally the top 10, the top 5 teams from each division. And so in the first half, in divisional play, he's scoring goals, one of the best goal scorers, and then in the top 10 play, he's one of the best setup men. He had like I think 18 points and 14 were assists, but they're good. They're dimes. Like he's like earning them.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm very intrigued by him. He's a guy I'm gonna keep an eye on. All right, let's get into the next guy, and that's also a teammate of Matthew Gard, the big mammoth defenseman Luke Vlooswyk. Nobody seems to know too much about him except that he's a shutdown center, or a shutdown defenseman type. And don't really know exactly what kind of upside he has. So maybe you can fill us in.
All right, so I wrote this on the preview I posted on my blog that they lost Southern and they lost Mann, right? 2 righties. I mean, they really soured on them fast.
yeah.
But that's just the rules with the CHL. But they're 2 different prospects, right? Southern was like the big, lanky, sure-handed, like has offensive ability, and then your Mann is the big shutdown, or what you want to be a shutdown guy, shot blocker, etc. Where Vlooswyk is kind of like a combination of the 2, right? I think he's better defensively than Mann. I don't think he has Southern's offensive upside, but he's got the higher IQ with the puck, if that makes sense. So if he is going to score a lot, outscore Southern from a WHL draft +1/+2 standpoint, it's probably going to be from just being smart, making smart passes, first pass delaying, winning his battles and doing smart things with the puck immediately after winning those battles along the boards or in traffic. So there's definitely a lot of upside there. Again, you see this kid under duress. He was under duress a lot because of the nature of his team, but he was their middle pairing guy, PK guy, and I mean he could skate. I like the way he skates. I think he's pretty nimble for his size.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think it's key. Oh, I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think like for him and what I was seeing and like just even watching a little bit of clips, like it's a lot of the mobility with the size, the fact that he's 6'5" and could skate pretty well too, right?
Yeah.
Like, both big aspects. So I think for the Flyers, like you said, Steve, you lose 2 right-handed shots. This is like a no-brainer. Let's fill up, some of the depth that we lost with Southern and Mann kind of getting let go.
It feels like they're looking for another Hunter McDonald type of guy that they find like later in the draft, big size, mean. I think this is a very appropriate pick for a 5th round pick. And let's go to the last pick of the Flyers draft, the 6th round pick. The only other under 6 foot player taken by the Flyers. And it's Nathan Quinn, also another late birthday, the 3rd of the draft. He's an August 29th pick, a center, right-handed. Seemed to have decent production in the queue. Nothing bad, but also a huge jump from year one to year two. What can you tell us about Nathan Quinn? It seems kind of like a bet on upside once again that, you draft him late, maybe he turns out to be something.
All right, this goes back to what we talked about last year, right? It seems like outside of Nesbitt, which is really out of his control, but they have drafted the top center for their team, right? So they Rohonen, the Swedish kid, Berglund,
Gard.
Luchenko, Gard. These are all, and now this kid was the top center for Quebec. Now Quebec wasn't very good this year. Their issue was goaltending and defense, and they wanted to play an up tempo attack. So all the up tempo attacking, you're going to be, but Quinn was their like number one guy. He was their number one center. He was on the power play, so he's not very big. He's a kind of a hunch skater, but he's quick. He could motor up ice. He's got good work ethic, good overall, I guess, like behavior on the average shift. With the puck, though, he's pretty dangerous, right? He could be a dual threat. He could score. He could finish in a bunch of ways. He's got a nice backhand. He could do some little fakey moves from in tight, but also, thread the needle on the power play. So in a way, like Westergard and Quinn, on their 6 foot, they could be a 1-2 punch in theory on, like, let's say a Lehigh Valley power play because of the ability of both of them to shoot and play make. So I really like this pick a lot. He was, if you looked at the fact that his team was similar to Gard, where his team was usually at a disadvantage, he's a guy that made things happen on his own. He wasn't waiting for like the puck. Like he's also responsible defensively too. He played on the penalty kills. He's not like just offensive guy. So the same thing. All these centers that they're drafting, they have to have the ability to do more than just produce points. Now, is that right or wrong? We'll see. If Zegras goes out and has a freaking 90 points next year, who cares about his defense? You know what I mean? But these centers that they've been drafting, they all fit the same profile, tall or average.
Yeah, I saw one thing too with Quinn that was saying, to your point, Steve, and then also just watching some clips, like his dual threat ability where he has a decent shot but also can play make, like that kind of allows his deceptiveness to come out, where some defenders, they're not sure if he's going to shoot it or pass it, stuff like that.
Yeah, he's got deception, like you said. Like he really is tough to prepare for, and he's got like some swagger. It's like kind of muted, but it seems like he's really confident in his abilities. So yeah, really those last 3 picks, really, I mean, all the picks, I thought, if you wrap it all up, like it made sense. The question will always go down to paying as much as they did for Nesbitt, and then gambling on Amico, considering the injury. But
yeah, we'll find out, right? That's what the fun part about the drafts is everybody's kind of taking their shots in the dark and their picks on certain guys, and then 5-10 years from now we'll really see what like the ultimate end result is. One thing too, to go back, like just to emphasize that the Flyers weren't focused on size, right? 6'3" for Martone, 6'4" for Nesbitt, 6'6" for Amico, 6'1" Murtagh, 6'3" Vansaghi, 6'5" Gard, 6'5" Vlooswyk. Then you have Westergard, 5'11", Quinn, 5'11". So I don't know if they were prioritizing size, guys, but
yeah, bro, yeah.
I believe Nesbitt is just under 6'5" too, so it's like he's also a beast.
Yeah,
it was like
this is how I could tell is when they ask them, tell us about this player. The first thing out of their mouth is size. So
it's 6'5", and
it's literally on the tips of their tongue the whole time.
Did you see the clip of Matthew Schaefer being asked on who the toughest player to play against in the OHL was this past year? And he named,
I wouldn't be surprised.
He named Nesbitt and then said Martin as a second. So
he didn't say Misa.
Yeah. That's the easy one. He's only
why?
6'1".
If you watch the game that they played, he shut him down. So maybe that's why. He's like, Misa's easy to defend.
There you go. I mean, size at that age, it's also a big advantage when they're not as big. And not everybody is a man. It's a little bit different. Okay, just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe, hit the notification bell for notifications to get notified when we release these episodes. And for the audio version, go to Spotify and iTunes, give us a rating and a follow as well if you can. That is the best way to support this show. All right, this one shouldn't take too long. Now, after our conversation, I'm like, all right, I was like, some of this stuff needs to change. But I'm going to show you our depth chart here that we put together. And let me pull it up here on the screen. Hopefully you can see it, Steve.
Yeah, right near the beach.
Yeah. That's my MacBook background. So can you see that okay? Do I need to make it bigger?
Let me try to expand it.
I can expand it.
I'm on
I can expand it here, I think.
No, it's my window. Oops. Because I had to keep the zoom. All right, here we go. Expand. Oh, yeah, perfect. All right.
Okay.
All right, yeah.
So this is how I have it set up. Left wing, bump at the top, then Gabrankin, then Barkey. And let me preface this with, it's always a combination of kind of where they are right now in their development too. So maybe a guy eventually will be better, right? But that's
nice work on the spreadsheet, my friend.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
that's nice work.
Yeah, so Murtagh, Siernik, Westergard, and then Sulku. Center being Luchenko, Nesbitt.
I mean, they are loaded. They are loaded on the freaking wing. The centers look great if you really think about it now. Like when you process it compared to what it was a couple of years ago. And listen, think about who's not on the wing is the guys actually at the NHL level. And one of them is was about to turn 20 years old.
Right.
And he's Michkov.
Michkov. Yeah. It's almost like if Michkov was still in this prospect list, they'd be like top 5, top 4 in the league in prospects.
I'm seeing a lot of like prospect rankings now after the draft. Like they're getting back into like the top 3, the Flyers in terms of the prospect pool.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of top 10, but how do you feel about the where we kind of view them? I was kind of looking at this Vansaghi, Gendron, Kaplan. I'm like, maybe Kaplan is above Vansaghi.
To be honest, I'd have Gendron above Vansaghi for me, just because of the fact that he scored did he score 20 goals in the AHL last season?
He did, yeah.
Like, I know he's a 7th round pick, but like scoring 20 goals in the AHL at his age, that's a big deal for me.
There's like 2 ways you can make a depth chart, right? I think at least a prospect depth chart is you could do it by prominence and upside, or you can do it as like how the team views it. Like this guy, friggin' breaks his leg in an elevator. I don't know why I just came up with breaking a leg in an elevator. I watched Speed with my daughter the other night. Like that scene in the beginning where like the elevator, like the lady's like, no, I won't get out. It's like, get out. Anyway, like, so if someone gets hurt, like who's going to be the first person they promote? You know what I mean? That's the way you got to look at it. That's why on mine, like I have Eklund. And you might have, cause it was funny about A-Bowls when Briere, specifically Briere, when he was talked and asked about the organizational depth and blah, 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 a couple of times he brought up A-Bowls. And listen, I like A-Bowls, but I'm just saying it's like, it just ties into when you are considering prospects and getting promoted, that equally important is the ability of the AHL team to succeed and who is helping them succeed. Oh, well, who deserves it? Because remember that the development staff is watching every player perform. So they don't really care as much about draft status. They care about, wow, this guy might actually be a really good like option for the 4th line.
Yeah. How's he going to help us actually in the lineup on a night-to-night basis?
Yeah. So like they'll have to have the discussion. I don't know how teams all do it. I'm going to guess like when you get passed over for promotion, there's some type of evaluation process or like formal evaluation face-to-face where you're like, this is why we decided what we did. And then within that, let's say conversation, sometimes they get upset and they say, oh, well, I want to trade. I feel I'm ready. And so I think that, whichever way you want to look at it, at the end of the day, there's no like perfect way to do it, because the guys that get promoted ahead of the star prospects, they might just stay on the 4th line, and the star prospects get more time.
Yeah.
So like, and bump is a great example that if you did it based on draft status, I don't even think the Hockey News had him in like the Future Watch for like 2 years in a row.
Yeah.
They did it. Yeah.
You know, when he was tearing it up at the friggin' at the college level. And so why? He's a 5th round pick. But you know, the Flyers, Flyer fans, Lehigh Valley fans, like everyone's like, oh, you know, you got to keep this guy. And the same thing with Grabenkin. You know what I mean? Like these are guys that the team I think is really looking at. So,
and to that point, I also did a under 25 list where I did include Michkov, Forrester, York.
Like, look at right wing.
Now they're cooking on right wing.
Oh,
look at all the
look at
right wings
right
they
wing.
have.
It's kind of insane.
They have. You could argue, right? Like you have Michkov to Tuamala. You could argue all these guys are going to be in the NHL like pretty soon, right? Like pretty much all of them are, aside from Martone and Tuamala. So
yeah. And this is another piece to, like, you know, criticizing the Flyers draft versus like praising it, is that even no matter what we argue about, I'm upset that you didn't take Hagens, and someone's upset that they traded this for whatever. Like, at the end of the day, other teams really wanted to draft some of these guys, and they ended up as Flyers. So they haven't forgotten anything. And it's not like these guys aren't progressing. They're pretty much to a man. They're all progressing.
So
you could always use some of them as trade. Yeah, you can always use some of these guys as trade.
Exactly.
Right?
That is part of building a freaking winner.
You look at that right wing, like there's no way they're going to keep all of these guys down the line. Eventually someone's going to get moved. That's just the nature of it. But you have so many, you know, prospects under 25 on right wing. You could use them to shore up another position you might need help at eventually.
Yeah.
Right?
Look at Tampa, right? They traded Drouin, right? They traded Drouin to Montreal for Sergachev. Right?
It was a great trade for them,
It's a beautiful trade.
Yeah.
But think about, like, when they drafted Drouin,
they weren't thinking about that.
They weren't like, we're going to trade him in 2 years, like, or 3 years, whatever it was, 6 years.
Well, this is what I was saying, is you have to hit, you know? You have to hit on the pick, because the pick, if it's a good player, it's always an asset, right?
But even if they don't hit, there's a brief little window where they're still valuable.
True. Yes.
You could trade them. The fact that they were scouted and they were, wooed and dined. And
another team might say, hey, you know, this player, this prospect didn't work out in this, you know, organization, but we can make it work out with us if we acquire
the Rangers were the world heavyweight champions of Sather, trading for former first round picks. Like, I could fix them. You know what I mean? Like,
Flyers did that. Went to the finals doing that.
It took another bad decision, GM, to make the McDonough thing happen. Like when they trade Montreal trading McDonough, like, oh, we have Subban. We don't need that McDonough guy.
Right. Yeah.
He's gonna go to the Hall of Fame.
So then I did this one as well and color coded it of full roster. I forgot Massimo Rizzo on this team is the only player, so I'll have to add him. I don't know how I forgot about Rizzo, but
Rizzo changes the whole dynamic.
Yeah.
you add Rizzo in, and now the Flyers.
The funny thing about Rizzo is he's named after one of the Jerky Boy characters, and I was gonna. It's a family show.
But yeah, when you look at it, and you know, when I do look at the right wing, though, you know, they have Tippett playing left wing, they have Forrester playing left wing. It's like, I feel like as long as you have a good winger, you can play them on either side. It's really just. And I was thinking about this today. If I'm a GM, like, I'm trading my wingers to just build depth down the middle and on the back end, you know?
Yeah.
Because the wingers are so much easier to replace than a center.
Well, the perceived value just isn't there, right? Like, when you look at one of the most valuable positions across the league, you're ultimately going to go center, D, goalie probably, and then winger is going to be last.
Yeah,
so,
but
ultimately, if Florida's helping change that narrative, though, because they've been doing it with, like, insane wing play.
Yeah, it's true.
Freaking line.
But they do have Barkov and Lundell right down the middle, and Bennett, right? Like, I was just thinking about it with, like, that Jack Eichel trade back in the day. When a guy like Jack Eichel is available, you get him.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, you give up your wing depth, you give up, you know, a good prospect. You go out and you get him because you're not going to find these guys. You're not finding a top 10 center in the NHL. So you go
unless
out,
you're willing to pay for it,
right?
And afford it on the cap.
Yeah, but figure it out, because that's your opportunity to be a competitive team. And I think that's what the Flyers are building a lot of these assets for, is when they find that opportunity for that center, for that number one defenseman, or at least top pairing, go out and get them. You know?
Yeah,
Well,
like
think
put it
about
this
the
way:
prospect pool, right?
I'm sorry, Vasili.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, think about the prospect pool in the sense, Steve, that like you look at what it was maybe 3, 4 seasons ago under Fletcher, and look what it's become now under Briere. I just think they're loading up so many different assets that when that guy does become available, they're gonna have not only the cap space freeing up next season with all the dead money coming off, but you're gonna have a lot of assets on the wing, a lot of assets potentially even on defense to trade away to get that top type of guy when he does become
And
available.
this is part of the strategy, right? First of all, any team, most of the teams in the Eastern Conference can pull up a chart like this, and we could all go, "Oh my god, ooh, yeah."
Yeah.
So again, like the enemy has a say. The thing that we have to, what the Flyers really should be considering, and I think they are, is that this is not whenever they hit the team and they're one of the better teams, or at least at worst, like a perennial playoff team. Like, it's not going to look like this, right? It's not going to look like this. It's going to have different names and different whatever.
Yes.
The key thing, though, is to identify the teams that are sinking right now or about to sink right now. And you want to snatch their best players before the other guys do.
Yes.
It's all predictive stuff. And this is where analytics come in. But let's just say based on the standings, right? Looking at regressions versus progressions, you're seeing teams like Pittsburgh, okay, obviously in the division, but they're one of them. Nashville, right? We don't know what's going to happen of Nashville, even though they have a strong farm system. Are we seeing the Rangers decline?
Even the Leafs, maybe.
Yeah, so again, these are just examples, but that it would be like a situation like who's going to be the next team to fire sale.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, like look what Florida did. They're like, oh, Marchand's available. There you go. Freaking should have won the Conn Smythe.
Reinhardt's available, right? Oh,
Yeah.
Gustav Forsling is on waivers, right? I feel like that's the point the Flyers are entering right now. When we kept telling everybody that 2026 is the year, we weren't saying 2026 they're going to be a playoff, they're going to be a Stanley Cup contender. We were saying that is the year where that window is truly open.
Yeah, Briere said so too.
Start adding. Yeah,
right.
Adding.
That's so, when your aggression can turn on.
He said that I mean, this is the first, but he talked about the cap. He talked about cap space. Like he specifically said that season, because I think they have some dead space going on.
Almost like 15 million coming off the books.
Yeah.
That is a difference making bundle right there.
Oh, Ryan Ellis's last year of LTIR,
I'm
dead
pretty
cap
sure
space too.
With all the like additions made in free agency and everything, like going into next season free agency, they're projected, I think, to have like 33.5 million
with Ryan Ellis, not on LTIR. So it's close to 40 million if they need it. Sorry to cut you off, Vasili.
No, that's fine. You made the point for me. That's a lot.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah. So again, we've been saying this for over 2 years on this podcast, Steve. All you got to do is go on Puckpedia, Cap Friendly, whatever you want. Look at their financials, and that they're not dumb. You use your financials as your guide way, right? And then couple that in with the fact that, and it will not be as strong as it is right now, that the UFA market, not that I like UFA, I'm actually not a fan of it, but it will be a much stronger UFA market next year, even if it does decline 80% of the players available, which it will. But, like McDavid and all those, Kaprizov might not be there, but it will be better than this year. And within that time, the cap goes up. This is kind of what we were thinking. So let me ask you this, as somebody who knows pretty much, let's say 99% of this list, and you've watched all of these guys develop over the years. The Flyers roster, as of right now, on paper, with Forrester injured, and we assume he's going to miss some time in the season. We really don't know yet.
I mean, he's not like injured, right? He has
he has an infection and
his elbow.
So they don't know the exact. He could be back for the very beginning of the season. He also could miss a couple months into the season.
Yeah, that's a touchy one.
Right. So we don't know exactly, but even with that leaves 3 left wing spots open on the Flyers roster, because Delorier is not an everyday NHLer. As of right now, Alex Bump is the big talk of the town. He's going to be the guy who makes it out of camp. that was always kind of assumed that he had a really good chance. We don't know for sure.
He was the best showing to at development camp. Like he kind of blew the other prospects away. But at this point, that makes sense with considering the other players there, right?
Yes, absolutely. The other one, obviously, being Jet Luchenko, made the team last year. He does play center, but you can always shift the guy over to the wing, like Noah Cates or Trevor Zegras, depending on what happens with him. Even though you're probably going to be hesitant to do that with Zegras, you're going to want him to really try. Anybody else on this list you think maybe, especially given, let's say, another 2.5 months of development, anybody else you think we should be paying attention to, or even do you want to comment on Bump's ability to be on the team and in the NHL level? And again, we're talking about starting the season because obviously as the season evolves, there's always call-ups. Guys always evolve. They have big showings. They get adjusted. Like a guy like Dorwart played in the NHL last year. I didn't think he was going to make the team out of camp, but he could make the team, halfway through the season. He needs pro time, right? A lot of these guys do. And then, there's obviously Gabrankin. But anybody here like stick out for you? Anybody I even named?
Well, first, what I think they're going to just take the surplus of right wings and move them to the left.
Yeah.
I think they're gonna. So you look at those right wings; they are all scorers except for Hathaway, right?
Yeah.
So like Brink, Tippett, Forster, Mitchkov connecting. Now we know Forster obviously has this issue, but I think that they're gonna move someone, at least one of those guys, to the left side and keep him there probably for the whole season.
Yeah.
And then and again, remember this is Tocchet, so you have a new coach, so he's a candidate. Like whatever we saw last year on the Torts, like we might have to throw that out the window. He might view things, just because he's a new coach.
That's what I told people. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I mean, if he comes in and keeps things exactly the same way, that's kind of like a ding to his ego.
Yeah.
Because it's like, wait, this is like now, and again, it's not like if the Flyers were a 50-win team, you're like, oh, well, why would I change anything? But they're not. They are a bubble playoff team. And they need a borderline rebuild, and they need to, produce. So, I mean, looking at Lehigh Valley had a good year this year. So if they didn't acquire a freaking goalie, I would have been like, dude, this guy is nuts. He really does not care, but clearly he cared. And I like the acquisition of Vladar. Vladar played better than Wolf in the second half. He's just that Wolf.
I've seen that.
Consumed all the minutes, understandably so, because of his strong first half. The left side of the defense are they still going to be rotating Andre and Zamula? Like, where do they fit in? As far as like Tuamala, is he's I think he's a left shot who plays the right wing. So
I don't remember. I have to look
is he deserving of a bump? No pun intended.
I know that Flair is like they're still worried about his 5-on-5 game. Like offensively, he's been very good in the AHL level. Like top scorer past 2 years.
Yeah.
I think he has a chance potentially. Like he was a guy that
just a look.
Torts
really liked.
Yeah, Torts liked him a lot. He looked really good in the NHL, but he
has a right shot actually on the right.
Yeah, I thought. Yeah,
so he's a right shot. Okay.
Let me ask you this, and we're gonna get into our next topic as I talk about this. So we can already assume Bump, Gabrankin, they're gonna have a chance. The big name is Porter Martone, obviously. There's a decision, and we're going to talk about the college thing in a second here, too. How do you think about, like, again, he's older for his draft year. He's obviously a big body, highly skilled. I'm usually and I think Vasili agrees with me on this, usually in, like, the caution about drafting a guy and throwing him in the NHL. And there was talk about even Porter Martone playing the left side, like Flair said that himself. But what do you think about a guy like Martone making the team out of camp?
It would be it would have to be on merit. I would like it to be on merit.
Yeah,
not on
earn your spot. Exactly.
Yeah. Now, unless it's like telling everybody else, like, hey, listen, he's going to friggin' college. We're giving him his 9 games. Now, I forgot if he gets his 9 games, is he eligible to play in the NCAA?
No, because that means he signed his ELC.
There you go. Okay,
and
so okay, I'm sorry. So basically,
the new rule.
It all will maybe it hinges on that decision then. It hinges on if he goes back to the OHL, he could get 9 games in. Everybody would be okay with it. And just if he blows people away in those 9 NHL games, then it's like, dude, we can't take him out. He's great. He's staying, right? But I don't think that would be an incorrect move to do that if he's going to return back to junior. If he's going to college, then I'm sending him to college. Unless he destroys training camp. Like he has things he needs to work on. He needs to work on his puck management. Yeah. He needs to work on his foot speed. So like do that in college.
That's my thought process, right? Like he obviously has a lot of skill, a guy that can be, a difference maker for you that you're going to hope is going to be a difference maker. I just think most of the time, right, unless these young guys really blow you out of the water and really earn their spot, I think it's always safer and probably better for their long-term development to have them go to college. I think the OHL maybe might not make the most sense just based on like the production. Yeah, exactly. So I think if you're not going to be in the NHL and you don't kind of blow the team out of the water in training camp, I think college is just the best place. That's the next logical step up for you in terms of competition. You can work on a lot of things. Also spend a ton of time in the weight room, right? And even add to that frame. So
yeah, it's not a bad point though what Steve talks about, because there is a contingency plan there too, right? If he does sign the ELC, they give him the 9-game trial. They're like, we really don't think he's going to stay here long than 9 games. They can be like, OHL will do, for the year. And then next year he's going to be in the NHL. But if I were him, I would go for the college route. Get your money.
Absolutely. You know why? You know why is because not only does he have nothing left to prove, he could only basically, I don't want to say there's the potential for a stagnation more so in junior, right?
Bad habits can come up, right?
Well, not really, but that mean that stagnation in terms of the other players in the pipeline leveling up one, and he's still at the OHL. So people that he might want to compete with one day, or he'll have to compete with one day, they're in the NHL, 20 games here, 10 games there. They're in Lehigh Valley, and he really has no clue about any of this because he's stuck in the OHL. So I think if he goes to college...
Let me ask you this, which I think is unlikely, but I'm thinking about Austin Matthews here. Is there an option for this kid? And I'm not saying he should do this. I don't think he should do this, but tries the 9-game trial with the Flyers, doesn't work out, goes plays in Europe against men, like SHL.
I don't know. I don't think the Flyers would want that because they lose. They really, it would be harder for them to have oversight.
Right.
On his development.
Yeah, that's a good point.
They have people in Europe, but everybody's based in North America.
It's not going to be the same.
Yeah,
they could put him in Finland to play with Alex Ciernik. That team's run by Sammy Kapanen, who's got good connections with them. So that
maybe of course it's an option. Yeah. But I think I really think, and it wouldn't be bad either, because I mean, think about the buzz that would create if he goes to the SM League or he goes to the that would be beautiful.
I'm just thinking though too, like think about college, think about who we're going to talk about right now with Penn State.
And
imagine you had a Porter Martone commit to Penn State to play with Gavin McKenna. How interesting that might be.
Right, Smith went there too.
Yeah, so let's transition into that. So let me stop sharing my screen here. I got to find my mouse, which is somewhere. Okay, so yeah, that's the big news that just came out. Gavin McKenna, we're all paying attention to him. He probably is the best prospect that we've seen since McDavid. Right? I don't want to put him on McDavid's level because McDavid's insane, but at least production-wise, right, had like a Mario Lemieux level production in juniors. Looks incredible. I mean, I've seen him. It looks absolutely incredible. Franchise caliber prospect. So he officially signed with Penn State. I believe it was a $700,000 deal, which is a lot for a hockey player. It's not like the NBA.
I just feel bad for the previous generations, man, how they missed out on this.
Yeah, I know
they never got paid, right? So.
Yeah, he's walking in the NHL a millionaire.
Oh, people got paid. They didn't get paid.
That's what I mean. Crazy. Exactly.
Yeah.
So now, obviously, this is a big deal for Pennsylvania in general. I was not a Penn State fan. In fact, I first half went to Bloomsburg before I transferred to Temple, and everybody there hated Penn State. I don't really care. I just think it's awesome that Penn State program is moving forward and that the D1 hockey program here is going to become, a pretty serious program. Getting Gavin McKenna is absolutely insane for Pennsylvania in general to have this level of talent, which is, you could say maybe he's even NHL ready today. Jackson Smith, like you said, for first round pick from this year, and now it could be Porter Martone as well heading there. I don't know if they're going to have the money because he's going to get paid as well if he goes to college hockey. I imagine they do have the money, to be honest with you. I'm very curious. I'm going to open up to Steve first, Vasili. What are your thoughts about this with Gavin McKenna going over and, what Penn State could become as a D1 hockey program in general?
It's huge for everybody involved except the CHL. I mean, and man, the people in medicine had, like that. But listen, the state of Pennsylvania had a generational prospect before. Connor McDavid, remember he played for Erie.
True.
So technically, but no, he's brilliant. I'm going to put him on a Bedard level because again, I'm like, I was on the Bedard thing. I was like, oh, he's going to be the next, Crosby, and so we got to temper those types of comparisons.
Right.
The numbers don't lie that he's in exclusive company. It's just like the jump from the CHL. This is really what I'm not even going to predict it. I'm just curious, like really curious how big of a jump he's going to have to make everything wise, goalie wise, rinks, just rink quality wise, like everything, the atmosphere, jumping from the CHL to college, all these kids. This has been a big debate online, the scouting community. What's better for your development? Is it college or is it the CHL? And these have been not necessarily warring between two warring factions, let's say. It's just not really bragging rights either. It's just out of really curiosity. If you're developing players, what is better for them? And if you look at, like, let's say the top 20 scores in recent years, rookie scores in the NHL, most are coming from either Europe or NCAA. They're not coming from the CHL like it used to be. So it's going to be curious for someone like myself who's been watching all this stuff for the last, 11, 12 years to see, like, all right, now we get to see how McKenna's going to perform as a consensus top pick, similar to James Hagen's, right?
Right. That's what I was thinking.
Hagen's was like, oh, he's going to come in, he's going to destroy you like Will Smith, and he didn't. And like I said, Hagen's saying he let people down. So we can measure now. If McKenna does what Celebrini did, then it's like, well, there he is. If he exceeds Celebrini, now we're talking like
generational level,
generational, like legit generational level stuff.
Yeah, I wonder if he has a Celebrini-like year. Who, I mean, let's be honest, Celebrini reminds me of Crosby when I watch him play.
Yeah, there are similarities, definitely.
Yeah, so like when I see if McKenna comes in and he's scoring 2 points a game, or more, like there's going to be a feeding frenzy over this kid.
Yeah,
for sure.
And he's going to have talent. He's going to be surrounded with talent.
Do you think that team with, I know Penn State was never really that good, but let's just assume that Porter Martone goes there, but it's Martone,
great.
McKenna.
Is it Sergeyev?
I'm not sure.
On my draft report. No, I think Sergeyev, they have a good team. They pulled off some upsets last year. So I think Sergeyev, the Calgary prospect, is their goalie. I don't know if he might have signed. Anyway, the Big Ten is going to be a bloodbath, though. So as good as Penn State is, Michigan loaded up. Michigan State, I think Augustine is going back. I don't think Augustine signed. So it is going to be, Notre Dame is going to take a step forward. I think they were really good last year, except they were mostly unlucky. So you have Minnesota, you have Wisconsin's looking for a bounce back season. So it's going to be fun, man. If you're a college hockey fan, again, I feel bad for the CHL.
They had all the talent making their way to the NCAA now, right?
Oh, so man, college hockey.
Well, they're going to have to adjust. It's going to force the CHL. Like, I mean, I know during COVID, I think it was the OHL or maybe it was the Q. I can't remember. Had that like no checking rule. Yeah. That's what happens when you get cocky. Like you can't. Like
they took out fighting, and then the OHL experimented with the no body checking during. I think,
which is crazy.
Yeah,
which is nuts. But like, again,
you don't have a monopoly anymore.
If you don't have the ability to watch Big Ten Plus, I don't want to work for them. I'm just saying, like I have Big Ten Plus, and I know people do it illegally. It's easier. I don't know, But if you just want the app, if you're a hockey fan and you like prospects, you have to get it. You have to have access to Big Ten Plus because Big Ten Network doesn't always show. They have to show basketball. They got to show football.
They're not always
If you
showing
get
the
Big Ten
hockey.
Well,
Plus,
they're gonna show McKenna games. That's for sure.
Well, yeah, you can watch all the games, all the teams. There's going to be some draft eligible kids there playing as well, beyond McKenna. So
it's going to be interesting.
I got to see if any schedules came out.
It's going to be really interesting just for the development of these players, right? Because like you look at McKenna, 129 points last season, like obviously ripping up the WHL. Like for the WHL and CHL, they're losing so much of these talented guys. But I just think like for the development of these younger players, like you're getting to play against men way earlier in the NCAA and like harder and more difficult competition. So I just think like ultimately making some of these top stars even better players before they reach the NHL level. I wonder like how they're going to hit the ground running once they get to the NHL. It's going to be interesting for sure.
Yeah, I think it's going to help prepare them. So let me ask you this, Steve. Now that we went through all these young guys, who do you think leveled up the most in this year's draft? Like who, it doesn't have to be one team, it could be a couple teams. Like who do you think really knocked it out of the park and set themselves up? Because I think the Flyers leveled up. I think they really filled out their system. But there were several teams, at least 5 or 6 teams I thought did a fantastic job in this draft.
The Islanders, with or without Schaefer.
Yeah,
it was really something that we haven't seen them do. I've analyzed every team's draft for like over a better part of a decade, and I don't remember ever being excited about what the Islanders did except for 2018 when they got Dobson and Wallstrom, and that but what they did was phenomenal. I like what Pittsburgh did. I know people like beating Pittsburgh up, but they, how it goes. Like they picked some of my favorite players. So anytime you pick some of my favorite players, I'm going to be like, you did a good job. So the Dubas definitely had a hand in the Kindle thing. I think Wes Clark, he brought Wes Clark over from Toronto. He's the one that drafted Cowan. So they don't mind these like smaller guys. They want the guys who are like crazy, intense competitors and, have quickness and all this stuff. So, but I like, you walk away with 3 centers. They went center, boom, boom, boom. And Zanone, what's his name? Kindle, Zanone, and Horkoff.
Yeah.
So I like what they did. I like what the Rangers did. The Rangers didn't have a lot. And I've been very critical of them, but they came away. I think they stole Malcolm Spence. They got really good size and mobility on the defense. And then they got Michael Erickson, an undersized center, dizzying guy, who's a very good playmaker. Calgary, every year they do it. Calgary and the Devils usually make me happy. Calgary got Reshny and Potter and Stockselius. So all 3 could play center. Again, Calgary, they needed to address center ice this year, but they still had a strong pool. Their wings are ridiculous, what the Flames have, and goaltending too, and offensive defensemen. And you look at the names. So they went a little bit conservative with Maceo Phillips. He's a big shutdown guy, but you go Reshny, Potter, Stockselius, 3 outstanding offensive type centers right in a row. So Carolina did their Russia thing, right? They got
Ryabkin. Yeah.
They got Limatov.
I think Ryabkin still went too early.
Yeah, and they got Vigo. Vigo's not Russian, he's Swedish, but I think every team, I don't think anyone did anything horrifically bad like Ottawa did a couple of times. We were like, what the hell was Ottawa doing? Some teams like that even didn't have many picks. Like even Vegas got Ice Wozniak.
Yeah,
that's a first round quality right there, late in the second round. I haven't finished really diving into all the teams. I finished Flyers and Winnipeg. I got a lot more work to do for the rest of the summer. Buffalo too, because I was on Buffalo radio the other day, and they focused on the right side of the defense, and they kind of turned away from skill. The Sabres did, but I like what they did. But yeah, this was something. The one thing that was surprising to me with the Fly is if the Flyers drafted at least one goalie, just one goalie, and maybe took a shot at a playmaking defenseman instead of let's say you substitute two of the wings, I would have given it a super duper A+ grade overall though. But I think reaching for a couple, not drafting a goalie when the Kolosov thing is kind of like up in the air, and you know there's no guarantee that Bjarnason and Zavragan, as much as we like them, I thought it's a decent goalie draft. You got to come away with at least one.
We thought so too.
It was surprising with all the picks. Think about all the picks, right? And no goalie. It is a surprise, I would say.
And it's very unflyer like because they've always and they have a good track record with goalies, so that's why it didn't make sense to me.
Yeah,
but
yeah. Well, they got what they wanted. At least they seemed happy.
I thought it was a good draft for them overall. Like they obviously address size, no matter how much they want to deny that. I think their prospect pool did lack a little bit of size. They obviously drafted a lot of sizable guys. They do add some center depth too, even though it's not at the number 6 pick. They still get some centers throughout the draft. So I think for them it was a good one. I mean, the Islanders obviously is like the chalk one. Like you get Schaefer, and then you get Eklund and Atchison on top of it too. Like they had a incredible draft. Darsh has really done a great job for them so far.
Yeah, already. And credit to Nolan, not Nolan, Lamoriello. He did make that big Brock Besser trade right before right at the trade deadline to grab a really good, young. I think it was Cullen Potter, or not Cullen Potter. What's his name? Richie? Was it Richie?
Oh yeah.
Callum Richie.
Brock Nelson.
Yeah, Brock Nelson for Callum Richie. So they got another top prospect. So they've been retooling nicely. And then to everybody's chagrin, they ended up grabbing Shabanov, which was a painful moment for our site because we thought he was going to.
You know what? Like, let's wait and see. Like, I know the hype was nice, but
think about Gusev. That's all I'm gonna say.
I'm not losing any sleep over it. I don't care.
Yeah, like
it would have been nice, but I'm not.
Yeah,
it's
we'll see what happens.
Not a make or break it in my mind.
I always say with those Russian guys coming from the KHL, like we were hyped up because you see the skill in the highlights, but like for every Panarin and we said this on our shows for like in the past weeks, for every Panarin and Kaprizov you get Gusov and Dadonov. So.
Isn't Joshua Levo the best player in the KHL?
Well, he's one of the top scorers. One of the top scorers.
And not that he's a bad player, but he's not like he's a bottom 6 forward in the NHL.
It's going to be like if I think the Islanders did it because they just need to add. It's a new GM.
That's what
add skill. Yeah,
we needed to add skill too. We
had some buzz. It was stale, right? People were kind of stale on the Islanders, like older team,
right?
Like let's inject.
It was a
some
good
youth
move.
into this.
Dump and chase type of team, right?
I think they gave him a better guarantee than the Flyers did. I think they gave him a guaranteed roster spot, and I don't think the Flyers were willing to do that with their immense wing depth in their system. All right, Steve, let's end it on that. I want to bring you back on. We were talking about it here on the side too, but we've already brought it up to you. I want to bring you back on before the season starts. Talk about who's improved. We'll just have fun, just NHL stuff. It's going to be a dead period. There's not going to be a ton of news, but
we could tie it into 2026 too, because we'll have the WJSS, we'll have the Holenka.
Yeah, it's coming up. Exactly.
Okay, perfect. Okay, we'll talk about a date. We'll figure it out. Anything you want to leave the audience with? I know you're working on a bunch of stuff. Anything they can anticipate? Like, you have any dates for them or anything like that?
No, I'm gonna finish the rest of the summer pretty much until the WJSS. So for the next 3 weeks, might even bleed into it, I'll have to do the team draft recaps. I put a poll up on my Twitter. I asked everybody, you want me to cover the 2026 draft? You want me to recap? And it was like 85% wanted the NHL draft recaps. So, I got to add on to the Flyers one. I rushed the post. I got to add like the backstory to all the picks that they used to have and what they became. It's part of like one of my things that I do.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot. So a lot of detail in the team reports, but really, I already started posting rosters on my Twitter of the WJSS Sweden. So, and there's Flyer prospects on it, right? Rohonen is going to be, but it's in Minnesota this year. It's in Plymouth. It's not in Plymouth. It's in Minneapolis because that's who's hosting the World Junior. So they're doing WJSS in the Twin Cities and World Junior later on. So that's pretty much it. Draft report's done. It's once I finish the draft recaps, it's on to the next class. I've already started with the next class, but just appreciate all the feedback. Hopefully you guys get something out of it.
You're giving the people what they want, Steve. You're a man
Yeah.
of the people with the recaps.
Yeah, our audience loves you. So
Definitely.
Well, I'm just saying, like, I was hoping that they picked the draft because the team draft recaps are a lot of work. There's so much work that last year I had to stop. I cut off Toronto. I couldn't do like 6 teams because they were like the last 4 or 5. They were like 5,000 word recaps, and it was like
next time, don't ask people. Just
that's what I'm saying.
Best for you.
Well,
yeah, it is what
whatever. But yeah, I appreciate all the you guys having me on. It's definitely my you and the O&B guys as well.
Yeah.
I don't know how I got sucked into the Flyers universe.
It was me. It was me.
Hey, we appreciate
It's going to be
you
very
coming
hard
on,
for me
Steve.
now when
That's
I see if I see Mitch Kov coming down in a 2-on-1 with Martone against the Rangers, like
it's gonna happen, Steve. It's gonna happen.
Freaking same division.
Yeah.
You couldn't be from Utah.
Yeah. No, we're as close as it gets. Pretty much closer than
wait till
even.
like when football season starts now with the freaking Giants, the lowly, embarrassing Giants.
Yeah, you got to deal with the Eagles too.
I'm jealous. Listen.
Hey, at least you guys don't like the Cowboys like me. So.
Oh yeah, I forgot you're a Cowboys fan. Yeah. Who knows?
I'd call you a traitor, but you're Canadian, so there's nothing to.
I just I don't know. My teams are all over the place. I got the Flyers. I got the Cowboys.
Who are you liking basketball?
Raptors. So that's the only time I stay in Toronto.
And what about baseball?
I mean, I'm from Toronto. I gotta like the Blue Jays.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that. All right, so you have two. You went
2 of 4.
It's like you can't really root for anybody. You root for the Argos, in football. And then with the hockey thing,
CFL.
I could see like I'm not rooting for Maple Leafs. No, I will not.
Hey, my dad loved the Flyers growing up, Broad Street Bullies. So I just naturally that was what was on
Smart
in my
man.
house.
Yeah,
exactly. Smart man. I mean, the drought is real, but it's not Maple Leafs real.
Yeah, the drought exists for a lot of teams.
Oh yeah,
some teams that never even touched the finals.
It's crazy.
Yeah,
well, Florida used to be one of them. So
well,
there's proof it can happen for.
Yeah, we've had some recent like Blues.
Yep.
One. So
Vegas, I guess.
Capitals.
Yeah. Capitals. Yep, they broke.
Yeah, so we had that run where it was like same 2 teams.
Also, Chicago went like the longest, and then they won those
Penguins,
cups. Yeah,
Wings. Yeah, no, I think, like I said in the other podcast, I think Florida. No, I said on Buffalo already. I think Florida. They got 1 year left. I think.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a dynasty. I think that with the age and the mileage.
Let's hope.
Catch up.
Let's hope. I'm tired of seeing the same teams win.
Yeah, it's fun to shake it up. Let's get some more parity, right?
Yeah, I think
they were down 2-0 to the stupid Leafs.
Yeah,
I was saying to a lot of people in Toronto, a lot of buddies that like the Leafs, like if Stolarz never got hurt, I think they would have won that series. So
yeah.
Imagine this conversation 5 years ago. If Stolarz,
I know, right?
Stolarz is the key. He's the deciding factor.
Yeah,
well, he had a great year.
That's why you don't give up on goalies.
He was hot. I was just
They're
watching the playoffs.
Wine.
He was locked in, so I'm like, hey, if he didn't get hurt, who knows, right?
Man,
but
the East
the
East is wide open. Though. Say what you want. I mean, I'm talking about divisions and.
I think we're in a transition period in the NHL. I was like looking at rosters.
The West is where it's at.
Yeah, but we're like
non-cup wise.
I think there's going to be the West much less than the East, but there's a big transition of kind of what you were referring to earlier. Like the teams that were on top are all kind of getting knocked down a peg, and then all of a sudden there's going to be this transition. Probably not this year, but probably that 2026 year. I think a lot of teams that have been waiting to improve will hit another level.
Yeah, someone's gonna freaking bottom out this year. At least
I'm thinking about
time.
Montreal. Like I think Montreal's a dark horse.
Right, they're an up and comer. Right.
Yeah, and they added big time.
Yeah,
they basically
Dobson.
They added without really hurting at all their everyday lineup. They added Dobson and Bolduc.
Yeah. And that Demidov barely played with them,
It's
and
gonna
that's
be
going to be
interesting to see what they do next season.
Yeah,
but that's important to the Flyers because. And here's the thing, like a team like Buffalo too, you can't sleep on because you take away that 13 game winless streak. If they just played 500, they would have been right there with Montreal for that last wild card. So although they got a weird GM there, the Flyers, the Jackets, you have to wonder about them. The Islanders, the Rangers, those last two spots, the wild card
the Metro's
spots,
wide open.
Yeah,
it's wide open.
What's gonna happen with
Pittsburgh's
Boston?
the only one, and who cares? Who feels bad for them?
No, nobody. And I'm gonna hate them if they get Gavin McKenna. You know what I mean?
It'll be
Like,
That's the plan. That's been Dubas's. I guarantee that's how Dubas got the job. I guarantee part of it was like,
that was his pitch. I'll get us the
hire
next
me.
Crosby,
I will
right?
build you a freaking. I'll build you a winner. I'll suck draft picks, but I will get you your franchise guy.
I fucking hope
You have a good point, probably, but we'll see what happens.
Hey, the lottery.
So,
yeah. Bullshit. I'm already mad about it. Didn't even happen. All right, Vasili, anything you want to add before we leave?
No, just thanks again to Steve for coming on. Obviously, like, amazing insight. Our listeners love it, so we're excited, for the next time around as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to remind everybody, please like and subscribe. Hit the notification button to get notified when we release these episodes. And also for the audio version, go to Spotify and iTunes. Give us a rating and a follow if you can. Again, that is the best way to support our podcast. If you haven't done that and you made it this far, please, please, please do so now. And also, shout out to our sponsors, Jim's Steaks at 4th and South. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim's. They have one of the best, if not the best, cheesesteak in Philadelphia. And then Public Summit Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Go to them for your insurance adjustment needs. They will help facilitate the process between you and your insurance company. Make sure you get the best claim possible. And also, shout out to SportsSpider.com. They aggregate content from all over the internet and organize them by your favorite teams, podcasts, videos, clips, and everything. Our stuff is always pinned at the top. Thank you again, everybody, for listening. Steve, thank you again so much for coming back on and being awesome on this show. And thank you to everybody who's listening. We love you guys. And remember, always stay gritty.